Maria, would you like to go first and introduce yourself?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Maria Chrisley. I'm the head of design for the Atlassian design system and looking after all things design language, scalability, all of the infrastructure and tokens. I've got an amazing team of specialists who are very passionate about this area. So I'm very happy to be here. So thank you, Farid.
Beatrice, will you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Beatrice. I'm a senior design systems at Bumble. Right now, I focus on the product design of all the libraries, documentation, and also on tokens. We're kind of changing the way that we see tokens and how we structure them. So we're kind of there trying to follow the human interface guidelines as well, the latest news that we will talk about during this meeting. So yeah, looking forward for that as well.
Love it. I would love to hear your thoughts on the tokens that Apple documented with their human interface guidelines. So we'll be interested
Yeah,
to
there's
see.
a lot to talk about.
Love it. Daniel, would you like to go next?
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Henderson-Need, pronouns he, him. I'm the head of design technology and systems at Mantis Co. I specialize in accessibility and scaling accessibility across large organizations, especially in the design area. So I created the CVS Health annotations kit with a few folks, and I've worked at Pinterest, CVS Health, and a few other places. So really excited to be here and chat more about one of my favorite fundamental systems that we use every day.
Love it. Daniel, and I remember you had accessibility annotations from CVS. I see this FigJam file everywhere on LinkedIn. Would you like to share that with others?
Yeah, I'll put that in the chat. And if anyone has any questions or wants to jump on a call with me afterwards, happy to always do that. And try and spread the word about making accessibility easier. So,
Well, great. Great. And my name is Farid. I'm living in Santa Clara, 1 hour drive from San Francisco. Happy to be here. I'm going to host this session today. So the goal for the session is to inspect and reflect on how the human interface guidelines design system is used within Apple products and to learn best practices and grow together. They don't have web as a platform documented within their human interface guidelines, but we've done our best trying to connect the dots. So let's see how it goes. One important thing is that this session is a learning opportunity. We are not inviting people who actually work on this design system to make these conversations more open. We are here to learn. There is no critique. We understand that making a design system on the level of Apple is very hard. So that's why we are here mostly to reverse engineer the decisions they've made and learn from it. So let's dive deeper into the human interface guidelines documentation. As you can see, I put some links here within this documentation section and some highlights from the documentation itself. So we know that the Apple is like very private company when it comes to collaboration inside. People don't know what's the new iPhone will be, what's the Apple Vision new version might be, or who is working on that. But what they've done is they open sourced, not open source, they made it public, their human interface guidelines. So I guess there is a difference between making a design system open source versus making it public. Maria, I would like to get your perspective. You are coming from the leadership perspective. How hard it is to make your company design system public and what are the main benefits?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it starts first of all with the company culture that you have. And it is really interesting. Lots of different enterprises and companies have different cultures or levels of, I guess, comfort with levels of openness and closeness. And no, there's no right or wrong in this. I think for Atlassian, that's actually one of our company values to be very open and transparent. We are very much committed to building something that the community and the industry can leverage and learn from. And similarly, we want to take back from that as well and learn together. So that aspect of that openness and making the design system public for me is a really important factor. The second thing also is I think companies that have public design systems actually have a really strong ability to influence their own reputation for how they see design, whether design is actually more of an order taker or whether design is seen as a strategic function that is able to help with the identification of problem framing, problem solving, etc. So the fact that, many companies have their design systems being publicly available, I think it helps to first of all, like teach the community and the industry what we're going through and what we're learning and how we're applying it in our context. And then secondly, also like the benefits of that has to your, company brand, reputation, design maturity, talent acquisition and attraction. And so I think it actually has a lot of benefits from being public, being open in that sense.
Love it. This is all great. So thank you very much. Just a quick overview, right? It all starts with the culture, and the main benefits of having all publicly available design systems are, as you mentioned, like 4 bullet items here. Great. Daniel, you're coming from accessibility perspective, right? So what are your favorite things about the ways how Apple human interface guidelines documented the accessibility part?
That's a very good question. I think with the way that the HIG writes about accessibility is super critical because it's designed for third-party app developers and designers to create accessible applications. And I think one thing it does really well is it highlights the importance of using out-of-the-box controls as much as possible. And so if you look at all the liquid glass documentation, one of the things they say over and over again is this, hey, if you use Swift UI or UI kit components, you're going to get this stuff for free. And that's really important, especially as it's gone to a more translucent design. There's also specific callouts in there saying people will use decreased transparency, increased contrast. Those modes, we expect people to use them more. And you get that for free if you use their stock controls. So I think that's something they do a really good job of. I don't think it's something that we as designers and engineers take seriously all the time, because our leadership likes something custom, so does our brand team. But I think they do a good job of actually calling that out.
Great. And Beatrice, do you have some interesting insights or highlights from the design perspective that you really like?
So at first, when they released like all the liquid glass and stuff, I remember seeing like a lot of things on the internet saying like, this is not accessible, this is gonna look bad, this is not working. But I guess like the more you dig into their like human interface stylized, their documentation and all that, you can clearly see that this was the work of a lifetime, kind of, where like there's a lot of little things that they put out just to make the new design system stand out and make it so good that I think there's no one on earth like that has this so well structured design system.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, I agree that this new liquid glass is there are like different reactions on the market, but I feel like everyone now understands that yes, that's the future. And Maria, from leadership perspective, so this is a huge major shift in a design system, right? So all the different interactions, the components are completely different. How do you feel about this kind of major redesign efforts within the companies? Maybe have you had some examples where you done some like this kind of major shift in the design language, or like how hard it is to onboard, to distribute, and to make such changes as Apple Liquid Glass?
Yeah, I agree with Beatrice. It's actually for any company, especially the caliber of Apple, to do something like this and launch something is huge in the industry. It's very rarely seen. And I think it's more of a generational thing that we see. It's very expensive, and you need to then make sure that you get that return on investment from rolling that out effectively across every surface, every touch point. So I think that when we see this, it's actually pretty special to see, I guess, how people react to it. The last major design language update that Apple did was back in iOS 7, when they went from their skeuomorphism to their minimalist. The flattening of design, the minimalist aspects of design really then shifted the entire industry in terms of what was then focused on and perceived to be modern. This age-old question of what is modern is constantly changing. But I think that when you see these quite significant shifts in design language from an era point of view, it is quite an important milestone in any industry or any craft. From my personal perspective, and this is all publicly available, so there's lots of resources and information out there, we've also undergone a huge brand refresh and transformation for our company. The new brand was launched last year. We have an annual company conference called Team 24. It was quite a stark shift from what we used to have. It's got a lot more bolder colors, use of mixed media, collage, and photography. We moved away from the more graphical illustration style and moved towards this composition style of illustrations. For me, it signifies it's quite differentiated in the market. I haven't actually seen anything, and I know that we work really closely with the brand team. We have a really strong partnership there, and they really try to find and look into what are the characteristics of our brand that are more uniquely Atlassian and iconically Atlassian. And I really love that because Atlassian has over 18 apps that the Atlassian design system supports, which impacts hundreds of designers, thousands of developers, including our ecosystem partners that build apps to extend upon in our marketplace. So that has a really huge opportunity for us to go, how does that brand refresh and those characteristics and that brand identity translate into product? And so I've been working with an amazing team of designers to do just that. For us, it's more about being clearer on the North Star or the direction in which we're going in. Like you have to do that. And then to identify how you're going to then slice that up and roll that out. We are doing a more iterative approach to this. And so at Team 25, which happened in April, if you Google that, you'll see our founder keynote and lots of deep dives and sessions that speak to this. But we announced sort of like, I guess, the initial wave of design foundations and design improvements and changes that we were making at Atlassian. First and foremost, to improve the coherence of our app experiences. I think that's one of the things that we've been focusing really hard on and really going down and sweating the details and looking at typography spacing and introducing a completely new custom font that we called Atlassian Sans. All of our iconography has been completely overhauled. We've got, similar to Daniel, like we have a very strong focus on accessibility, and that's super important to not only focus it and target it as a hero topic, but also to make sure it's infused in every decision that we make across our foundations within the design system. So our typography choices were led by things like, is this legible? Is this scannable? You know, what do the WCAG guidelines indicate or want to have out of this as a good result? And then pairing that back with pilots, tests, stress testing, performance testing, et cetera, to make sure that all aspects were able to be optimized for. So because of the level of complexity and depth that goes into every single one of these, like, you know, millions or microscopic design decisions, it does take a long time to roll out. I did notice that Apple have said that they are giving their, you know, app community, I think a year to actually completely update to liquid glass. And so they're giving people an opportunity to do that. So yeah, I can only imagine how long it would have taken them internally to do this because it is a big deal.
Love it.
Right, I think Mary has brought up an interesting decision point for any design system team that has Android and iOS presence. And that is that we've seen many design systems take the approach of trying to standardize and make it coherent and consistent across your web, your Android, and your iOS platforms. If you look deeply, you'll realize there are some differences between each of the design systems because of the expectations and the capabilities of the platform. But I think with Liquid Glass and what's Material 3 Expressive, the biggest divergence in Android and iOS design patterns we've ever had. And so in modern times, right, I think that's going to be really interesting to work with design system teams and the brand team to realize what things from the Liquid Glass are we going to take? Because if you think about your Spotify's and your Netflix's, you have extremely customized components where you look at both Android and iOS, it's almost identical. They're going to have a lot harder time adopting Liquid Glass and Material Expressive because they have this really brand embedded design into their design system, whereas other design systems don't have that. And so it's going to be really interesting to see whether or not Apple does require Liquid Glass adoption and to what extent, and how design systems are going to change course and provide more flexibility maybe or more divergence in their Android and iOS components to support what seems to be a less consistent ecosystem in general. Do people prioritize the consistency of the user on their platform or the consistency of their own product? So that'd be interesting to keep an eye on. But I think WCAG did a great job at standardizing some of the requirements and kind of the normative requirements that any platform should have, whether or not it's web, Android, or iOS. Even though web is in the name, if you've not heard already, there is a working group or a task force, within the W3C working on mobile accessibility guidelines or translating maybe some of the things that is already in WCAG. So there is some base level there. But it's also important to realize that Android has a very different accessibility API to iOS. And there's some things that are shared, but there's some things that are very different compared to the web. So again, as we move away from each other, it's going to be really important that we don't just assume everything is the same because, as I say, the capabilities are very different. And we need design system people to understand the different capabilities across the platforms so that we can maximize the experience for our user.
Great. So we went through the documentation, right? And we have some interesting things to learn from them. I personally like the way how they created an article for adopting liquid glass with all the best practices in one place, all well documented, highlighting, again, helping the organization and the industry understand and onboard them how this major design system shift is looking and what kind of practical steps you can take. I really like, Maria, that you highlighted that they are giving the community 1 year to transition, and every design system update, every update on iOS or macOS, they also are fixing a couple things, and I'm sure there is like visual fixes, code fixes, performance fixes, accessibility fixes as well. And the next thing that I would like to go through is the patterns and tokens. Beatrice, what do you think about the way how Apple documented their tokens? Do you feel like they just provided guidelines, but they are not actually following them? What's your feeling about tokens section within the Apple Human Interface Guidelines?
So I've also seen a few videos like talking about the liquid glass where they use all of these colors that are listed here. I think there might be some nuances or ad hoc colors that they must be using somewhere, just because maintaining a design system or using all the colors that you have on a design system sometimes is very hard. You need to make some sort of adjustments before like some sort of ad hoc colors. Of course, their design system can be very strict and you can follow it 100% or at least try. But I do feel like they use them all, but also a few more just for this liquid glass experience. Like, I don't feel like all of these colors can do what they show us that they can do, basically. In terms of documentation, like there's not a lot of about tokens. There's a little bit more information on the developer side than on the design side. Like they don't tell you where to use these colors. They don't tell you like how they should be used properly. Like they do tell you like how it's called and all that, and like what are the X values or the RGB values. But like it's not a documentation where you know where each color is being used. But I would recommend though one video that I shared there. I mean, I don't know where the link is, but I can share it again, where like they clearly tell you like where to use almost each color or like where to use each layers that they've built for liquid glass, which is like at first it might not seem a lot and you might think like, oh, it's just a transparent background or whatever. But then you see clearly that there's like a lot of layers in between that they change pretty much, like if it's an image, if it's text, if it's, I don't know, anything else. So as mentioned before, like I think the tokens work that they've done is impressive. For sure, it's not everything that we see here. And there's so much more things in like above or like internally on the design system that maybe we won't see, maybe we will, who knows. But as mentioned before, like I do feel like these colors need to be a little bit better explained just for users to be able to use the colors and the design system more clearly. I also feel like, for example, documentation is not very extensive. I found the video much more helpful than the documentation that they have. So yeah.
Love it. Maria, I have a question for you. So maybe within Apple, they have a global design system and they have product-specific design systems as well that are maybe private. Within Atlassian, I'm just curious, right? You have the public version, but if we will take a look into public design system, it will be hard for people to recreate Jira or recreate Confluence, right? Because in order to do that, you need to have more like maybe private components that are available only to the specific teams. Like, how do you make sure? First question, do you have those kind of product specific libraries and how they are collaborating with the main design system?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is an age-old question that I think hits every large company when you reach a certain size. And the main way that we're managing this is that we've made it very clear that the Atlassian design system is the foundational core. There is absolutely no reason why anything foundational or, from a component, primitive, token level should be duplicated in any way by any other team. I think that's the power of the infrastructure that we've built at Atlassian and that got adopted at wide scale. Each individual, let's say, app area, like a Confluence or a Jira or a Trello, we've got many other apps that have local UI kits, which house a lot of the more specific contextual design templates and sticker sheets that then help those teams to quickly get up to speed and running. But every single aspect of that template or a UI kit should be attached in Figma via libraries to our core design system, so that when we update our semantic color tokens or our spacing values or our iconography, etc., that is rolled out instantaneously to the whole company. And the idea is that there isn't any heavy lifting for the other adopting apps to do in order to get that value for free. So I agree with Daniel's earlier commentary on, a lot of, I guess, brands have chosen to be more custom in their native Android and iOS apps. The downside of that is that you won't get these liquid glass updates for free. The upside of that is that companies made an explicit decision to be more custom, right? To be more in line with their brand or their and aesthetics. But there's pros and cons to that. That's something that I've always grappled with in my career, no matter where I've worked. How much do you actually go down into being more in line with the platform versus your own branding, your own design, your own user experience principles? So essentially, this is something that is a living, breathing, massive ecosystem that we're constantly trying to evolve. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight here is that it's really important that this is something that we're focusing on, is figuring out, well, what do we need to graduate or what do we need to build inside of the Atlassian design system core, because it is now universally used by more than one app or more than one product. I think having a way to level up and mature the core benefits everybody. So that's something that we're looking into. And I don't have all the answers, but it is something that we need at our scale.
Love it. Daniel, you shared a couple links here. Would you like to elaborate?
Kind of related to that point that Maria was talking about, I think Apple has realized that many companies do this. I'm sure they can see who's using Swift UI, who's using UI Kit, who's creating something completely custom. And so there's a function here that they I don't know how long it's been around for, but it's really, really helpful in Swift UI, where if you do create your own custom styles or typography, there is a relative to function, which means that you can say, which is important for dynamic font size. So if you want to have smaller text size or larger text styles as a user, you can use this relative to function. And so you can say, hey, I want our custom heading to dynamically resize relatively to the default HIG heading. And that way you don't have to define every single pixel size for every single scale on the typography resizer and settings. So I think it's really powerful. Maybe we'll see Apple provide more of these functions in the future that help companies customize things while still supporting a wide range of user needs.
Love it. This is a good example how we can get inspired by other domains, other platforms, and how they do things, and maybe pull that into like the web as a platform as well. Thank you very much. Great. Let's dive deeper into the components that they are being used. So we went through a couple products here. As you can see here, we went through the whole Apple One family, where we took a look into Apple TV, Apple Music, iCloud, and other products as well. And here on the right side, this is where we will start some collaborations with the community. We would like to ask you to take a look into all the screenshots, or maybe go into the Apple products that you know and use, and maybe do not limit yourself with the web platform, and take a look into other apps and add screenshots here as a part of the community insights. Great. So here they are. So as you can see, let's dive deeper into documentation first to read what exactly do they mean by sidebars. The sidebars appears on the leading side of a view and lets people navigate between sections in your app or game. So this is mostly all the human interface guidelines are coming from the Apple products. They don't have a dedicated section or platform app option to have web specific things. And looks like internally for web, they are not using human interface guidelines like strictly. And there are some deviations, and let's chat about it. So here are some of the sidebars that I was able to pull from different web applications that they have. As you can see, here is the Apple Music. There is also calendar sidebar, mail sidebar, reminder sidebar. Beatrice, like, what do you think about all these sidebars from the design perspective? let's imagine that you are working with an Apple, right? And that multiple products are creating their own sidebars. What will be your first step in the design? Would you like start doing the inventory and finding all these different examples? Maybe reach out to the product teams who are actually responsible for those and understand why they created the specific things? Or would you like to start with quick components in Figma and just propose that to the community internally and say, here are some like golden standards of sidebars, please critique, let's improve it together and use it?
So I'd say, like, on my take, it's a mix of both, a mix of doing an audit of all the components that we can actually see, auditing all of the same side, like all the sidebars that Google has. I think with a few of them that you can select from multiple platforms, you can actually see the differences between them. And then also one of the key things, and I think we should do more, is ask not ourselves, but also other people on the why. Like, why are you
Mm,
doing the things that you're doing? Why is this like this and not similar to this one? Or why does this deviate a little bit from the design system? So I guess those two questions are very important to understand, like, the decisions behind making one thing or another in terms of the design system, but also checking out what they have in terms of the sidebars. It's very customizable, but at the same time, it's not. So what I mean with this is, like, I guess they have like different kits for all the different platforms or products that they have. And then each one of them, as Maria mentioned, must have its own core colors or core typography, which is kind of the same, but yeah, pretty much based on colors. And each one of those platforms has its own. So I think they are all customized, but they all follow a global design system that kind of rules them all in terms of, like, for example, the selected the selected frame that we have here, where it says home or like appearance or inbox, grocery shopping, like all of them have the same feeling, the same border radius, the same background. But then what's within, it's what can change, right? For example, on grocery shopping, we have less spacing on the left or right, on the inbox and appearance. So I guess, as said before, like, you can customize a little bit of what they have on the design system, but not that much. So that way the experience looks cohesive. You can go through multiple products in Apple and understand what is a selected state, what is the default state, where to look at things. And I think that's what's brilliant about a design system like this one, which is having multiple products that you can use and you know how to use them. And I think that's the primary focus of a design system, which is helping users understand what they need to do. Design system is what also gives them, like, the feeling that you're using the same platform or like the same design system across multiple platforms.
love it. Great. And I agree with you that we might see some common patterns across different variations of these components, like toolbars. The selected element within the sidebar looks all the same. The only thing for Apple looks like they have like different border radius here. Maria, from your perspective, this is the part where the foundational design system tries to move a little bit more in this spectrum of more complex component sets like templates or even pages, when the foundational design system are mostly focused on the atoms, molecules, or organisms, like very small reusable elements within the design system. So I saw that within Atlassian you have a header navigation as a component. How hard it was to, because this is the part where you need to align with multiple products at the same time. There's like a lot of cross-functional collaboration. So could you please share your story, maybe some learnings, how hard it was to unify all those headers across the products?
Yes. Well, first of all, I will say that there's a whole team behind that. And, there is if you go to our Atlassian website, there is under, I think it's Tech and Product News, we've got an article or thought leadership from the actual team that is behind the design of our navigation component. As a design system team, we worked very closely on that project because obviously we want to make sure that we can platformize and standardize a number of the elements that went into that global navigation header, as well as the side menu. I think what's really important to note is that those types of transformations where you're trying to align the whole company take a really long time, both because of the technical complexities, but also the design decisions that need to be made and everyone trying to balance out, user needs, different contexts, especially the information architecture. I'm a big fan of starting these projects from a content-led first approach. We recently redesigned our own Atlassian design system website, and it was very much content-led because the information architecture that underpins the structure of the site is actually first and foremost one of the most important things that you can do that you need to get right for a documentation site. The whole purpose of having it is for discoverability, ease of finding the information, and clarity in the content and the guidelines that you are documenting for. So yeah, I think it's quite complex. In our team as well, like we are constantly striving to make adoption easier and better. And so we ourselves have Figma plugins that optimize and help designers with their migration of their files, migration of their work. We're trying to use marking files being marked ready for dev inside of Figma. We're trying to ensure that what's in Figma reflects design to code parity with what our developers need as well, aids efficiencies and a shared common language between both crafts. One thing I will note from what Beatrice was discussing about this and with these different side panel bars is that, you know, design systems actually have to be for the past, the present, and the future. And you're optimizing for all three of those all at the same time. The design system or the HIG documentation and example for me needs to be reflective of where Apple wants the pattern or the design to go in. It needs to reflect this is what it should be for everybody based on our stress testing, user testing, iterative design processes, etc. And that's not necessarily reflected in every single one of their apps from day one. The music sidebar example is being probably the closest reflection of that newer, of that design guidelines, whereas the others just haven't caught up yet. I'm assuming it's more that rather than a reflection of them just having inconsistency for inconsistency's sake, because the active state of that home menu item in the music, yes, you're right, the radius is not the same as the one in the appearance one next to it. I don't see a good reason for having those two things be different, right? So I think it's probably not by choice that it is like this, and it will just take time because adoption takes time. There's an investment that needs to go into it. And there's always lots of other competing priorities when it comes to what those teams actually then want to improve in their product set.
Is there a red line for design systems to unify things too much? Or in what kind of cases it's
Yes.
okay for other products, for example, to deviate a little bit more?
Yeah, I think this is where design systems can be more opinionated on where it is okay to be more flexible and optimize for maybe different choices on a scale versus these are the things that need to be strictly adhered to because they aid coherence in your product suite or across all of your apps. And so I think that's a decision that companies don't necessarily consciously make, that they should make. A design system can offer the scale on a spectrum. Let's pick border radius as an example, to offer everything from, 4 border radius through to 24. But it's actually up to the intent and the context of each particular app to go, where do we fall on that spectrum? But those choices should be attached to and supported by the design system so that in the future, if we wish to change that or move in a different direction, we're aware of what options different apps have chosen and why. When we've done audits internally in our product suite, particularly when it comes to things like supporting different sizes for accessibility purposes, for example, the team found that not a single app was using a certain size that we were offering. It just wasn't useful. So why are we maintaining that? So after doing an audit of that componentry work, we actually removed that size because it wasn't valuable. And so again, we offered enough sizes to offer choice and that flexibility without limiting that creativity. I think creativity is paramount and a design system doesn't limit that. If it does, then you need to kind of question how you're setting it up and what decisions you're making in your company and what your product strategy is for your design system and for design in general.
Love it. Daniel, do you have any thoughts on the accessibility part? Maybe. So there are different strategies, right? When we are taking a look into different product lines and we can see that there are some deviations, people are not using our design system. And I've heard from others, there are multiple strategies. The first one is to try, align, and at least use design tokens because it's much more easier just to use some values there instead of the whole components, right? No matter which framework you're using on the front end, tokens is this like unifying layer that could be done. The second strategy is to have wrappers or containers. So they don't need to replicate all the different variations of how sidebar contents might look like. but they can just provide this sidebar as a container that will at least unify the wrapper part of the sidebar. The only way is to implement it within the component and then make sure that people are reusing those components because they can unlock this value that accessibility is, for example, implemented in this specific scenario.
Yeah, there's no question that increased consistency helps many people with disabilities, whether or not they're using a screen reader to easily navigate the page and having those consistent sections to know where to easily jump to and maybe what the headings are is helpful. So, same with someone who may have a cognitive disability, depending on what kind of cognitive disability you have, having that consistency is really helpful. And so we've seen like the WCAG 2.2, there was a consistent help success criteria, which essentially says that the relative order of help mechanisms like contact us, email, or chatbots are in the same relative order each time, but it's really helpful to make sure that between pages that we have them in a way that we expect them to come. How we deliver that kind of same consistency in design systems, I think it's on a case-by-case basis. And I hate saying that because it's really annoying that people want rules. But design tokens are, well, I guess the easiest way to start adopting design systems is aligning with the principles. Like most design systems have principles, usually accessibility or inclusivity is in there because it's a huge business case for design systems, because it helps align many of the issues that resolve many of the issues that we get in accessible products. Then there's design tokens, but not all design tokens are equal. Like border radius examples are great because we see it all over the place. I mean, personally, I don't care what the border radius is. I think sometimes it can indicate certain things, but compared with, colors, making sure that colors or color contrast is accessible, that's a much more important thing than making sure that borders are 4 pixels, 8 pixels, 6 pixels. So I wouldn't say every single thing has to adopt a design token. If that's what your company culture is and that's what the requirements are, then great. I'd make sure they're aligned. But I don't think we should enforce every single design token the same way to the same extent for accessibility.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you. Great. So let's move to the next section. We have a couple more component families here in place. So there is, for me personally, it was a little bit more confusing. The component family is called lookups. Lookups combine multiple separate views into a single interactive unit. Each lookup consists of a content view, a header, and a footer. Headers appear above the main content for all lookup, and footers appear below the main content. All three views expand and contract together as the lookup gets focus. Great. But when it comes to actual usage across all the different products, we can see that there are so many different variations of that. When Apple Music, they have additional controls on the lookup. Maybe it's not a lookup at all. Within Apple Music, they have title and the subtitle separately outside of the card. So what are your thoughts, Beatrice, like from design perspective? Do you see any opportunity here? Because it looks like lookups are not documented from like design language perspective. They are more like a pattern or direction instead of like clear components to reuse.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about this, and I think this some sort of slot component, let's say like this, where like you can include, as you mentioned, like a title, an image, and so on, but you can put it the way you want it to. Because like as you can see here, like there's like multiple ways that you can present the same component or like the same structure of the component, but then it just had like a lot of different things. So I think this is actually pretty good for a design system where like you are not strict into doing just one thing. And it also makes sense. Like Apple has a lot of products, like each one of them needs to have the ability to be a little bit more different or like more specific to that product. Like for example, Apple Music needs to have some sort of actions for the user to interact with it. Apple TV has some other actions and so on. So I think this is very clever in like ways that you can present the same kind of blocks in a different language or a different look and feel, basically. And I think, for example, here also tokens do a lot. Maria mentioned previously where design system need to be past, present, and future. But I do believe that sometimes what you do a year ago or what you do 2 years ago doesn't really reflect where you want to go now. So you have to change everything. You have to make it a new rebrand, or what Apple does almost every 5 years, which is just reimagine all of its and change the design system. With the liquid glass, they changed a lot of the tokens that they had just because what they previously had didn't work. A few things still work, like border radius and all that looks pretty similar to what they had before. But the way to present layers, textures, or even colors is completely different. So they had to change it all. They allow you to have that flexibility with components and also with its core tokens, basically.
Love it, love it. And from engineering perspective, we can see some signs that the product teams within the music and Apple TV, they are following some of the guidelines, because in the class names, we can see that they call it Lookup as well, the same as music. So we can see that they are calling it Lookup. I would like to have them more like as a tile or as a carb. But yeah, I guess this is the way how they name things internally within the organization, and this is how they work. I know that we are out of time. There are more components that we would like to talk about. Let me just pull them into our public board. Again, all the things are available. The recording will be available as well. Any final thoughts, Maria, Daniel, Beatrice, on the Apple Human Interface Guidelines?
No, I mean, there's so much more we could go into. So it's a shame that hours passed. But I think for me, there's always a ton to learn from the way that different companies document publicly what their design system is or their design philosophy. And I just think Apple's one of the best examples of doing that incredibly well. I'm sure they have things that aren't perfect or not quite right, or maybe that the community disagrees with. And I think that actually is fine. I think that actually drives a really healthy tension and a good conversation within the industry. And I don't think there's any one right or wrong way. So thank you so much, Farid, for having us and for taking the time to present this and prepare for this. So I look forward, to more. Thank you.
Yeah, related to that, I think one thing I would love to see Apple do in the future is, when they're trendsetters and they set how we design for the future, I would love to have them provide more insights into their research behind that. Whether I disagree or agree with the design changes, that's not really for me to decide, but I would love to learn why they made some of those decisions to help inform our own decisions at an organization going forwards.
Would you like to have those kind of research reports open source to the public?
I think the more insights that we can get, the better. It's not good just to blindly follow or doodle just because they've done it. It doesn't mean it's right. And I think we should be able to, as app developers and website developers, we should be able to make an informed decision whether or not we adopt certain things. So that way we can put the user at the front of our decisions rather than necessarily what the latest trends or requirements are.
And from design perspective, do you have any final thoughts to share?
Yeah, I mean, as Maria mentioned and Danny mentioned, there are things that I agree with, there is things that I don't agree with, but overall, it's a great design system where they always set the bar. In less than a year, we will see a lot more design systems follow this liquid glass approach for sure, even though they might be the first ones to say oh, this doesn't really work out, or the accessibility is not great, but we always tend to copy or or make some adjustments to what they do because, as mentioned, they set the bar and what they publish is what everyone follows, kind of. I do agree that there are some bits of information that they're not kind of telling us, which would be great to know. For example, I feel the documentation needs to have a little bit more of do's and don'ts, or a lot of the things that they explain on their videos doesn't really reflect on documentation, and it's great information for us to actually learn. So I'd love to see a little bit more on how was the approach to liquid glass and how to use that effectively on different screens that we can check. But as mentioned, overall, I feel it's a great design system with a lot of research behind.
And one thought from me, I really like the way how IBM gets contributions from the community when it comes to patterns and some of the components. So maybe the solution here is if the community could provide some feedback and contribute back to the human interface guidelines, that might be something as well. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Maria, Beatrice, and Daniel. It was a pleasure to chat with you. The recording will be available. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you all.
Bye.